On Tuesday, January 6th, President Trump announced that the United States would take immediate possession of up to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil. That statement came 3 days after Nicolás Maduro was removed from Caracas by U.S. forces and flown to federal custody in New York. The administration is calling it Oil for America. That name is doing a lot of work. What's being framed publicly as an energy initiative is actually something more precise. The first explicit declaration that a U.S. military intervention will be reimbursed directly through seized foreign resources. And unlike past interventions, this one isn't being dressed up as an accident. So here is exactly what we know. The oil in question is not newly produced. It's a largely sanctioned Venezuelan crude already sitting in storage tanks and tankers in the Caribbean. Inventory that couldn't legally move under prior embargoes even if it wanted to. So the White House says between 30 and 50 million barrels are now under U.S. control. Energy Secretary Chris Wright has been ordered to move the oil immediately to Gulf Coast refineries. Tankers have already begun diverting. Markets reacted quickly, but not dramatically. WTI crude dipped about 2%, settling near $56 a barrel, as traders priced in short-term supply surge and the possibility that Venezuela's long blockade is effectively over. So far, none of that is disputed. What is disputed is what happens to the money. In a Truth Social post and a follow-up interview, the president said the proceeds, which will be between maybe 1.8 and $3 billion, will be controlled by me as the president. His justification is that centralized control prevents theft by corrupt officials and ensures the funds are used for Venezuelan reconstruction and to offset costs borne by the American taxpayers. That statement is accurate to the record. It's also the point where the story changes shape, because this didn't come out of nowhere. Guys, so what essentially they're saying we're going to do with the money, because this is what people are worried about. We got the oil, right? We got the 50 million barrels. The United States has possession of that. They are going to sell it on the open market for whatever price oil is at. They're going to take that money, store it in U.S. banks, and use it to invest back into Venezuela to build infrastructure and help the country when the political climate is good for that. Right? They don't want this to go into corruption, to theft, and have it go into a broken nation. So essentially what they're doing is, instead of the U.S. taxpayers footing the bill to rebuild Venezuela, they're taking Venezuelan assets, facilitating the sale, taking that money and storing it until the time is right to invest it back into the country. Two things happen because of this. Number one, Venezuela pays for their own reconstruction. And number two, the United States gets cheap oil. Okay? Win-win in my opinion. But the intervention itself, right, the Operation Absolute Resolve, followed years of sanctions, asset freezes, and frozen oil infrastructure that left Venezuelan crude stranded and decaying. So those assets were already politically orphaned. No one could use them, sell them, or claim them without violating the sanctions. So what changed wasn't the oil. What changed was who could plausibly say they were entitled to it. And the timing of this matters. It's January 26. Oil prices are low. U.S. gasoline prices are politically sensitive. And the administration is openly reframing foreign intervention as a balance sheet exercise. The president has been explicit about this too, contrasting the move with Iraq. He says, we're going to keep the oil, not as a joke, but as a lesson learned. That's the through line. This isn't about punishment. It's about reimbursement. So what is it really about? Follow the incentives. First, energy pricing. Flooding the market with stranded Venezuelan crude pressures global prices without requiring new domestic drilling approvals. Second, political optics. A military intervention paired with a tangible economic return plays very differently than an open-ended stabilization mission, right? We went in there, boom, captured the leader, boom, seized the oil, boom, gonna sell the oil, boom, gonna keep the money. Now, what does it do? Like I said, lower oil prices for Americans, lower prices at the pump. And the taxpayer doesn't foot the bill for Venezuela. We're using the proceeds from their own oil to give them the money back. Brilliant. Third, institutional leverage. By asserting personal control over the proceeds, the executive branch avoids immediate congressional appropriation fights, at least temporarily. And fourth, privatization. On Friday, the White House is meeting with executives from Chevron, Exxon, and ConocoPhillips to discuss rebuilding and privatizing Venezuela's oil fields. That's not reconstruction. That is asset reassignment. No one involved is confused about that. They just disagree about who gets to oversee it. And this is where the pushback comes in. Because European governments and China have condemned the seizure as a violation of sovereign property rights. And that objection is principled and selective, but consistent. Domestically, Senate Democrats are focused on the personal control language. Federal revenue is typically subject to statutory oversight, not executive discretion. And they're not wrong to flag that. But at the same time, some energy analysts are skeptical that Venezuela's infrastructure can actually sustain the volumes being discussed. Years of neglect don't disappear because ownership changes. And that criticism is technical, not ideological. And it may end up being the most important one. So, what actually changes here and what doesn't? What changes is precedent. For the first time, the U.S. government has openly tied military intervention to direct resource seizure and monetization without pretending the connection is incidental. They got oil and they got Bitcoin, or we're trying to get the Bitcoin. Okay, they're saying, "Yep, that's what we did, not an accident, on purpose." But what doesn't change is the underlying power dynamic. The U.S. still has leverage. Venezuela still has oil, and global markets still respond to supply, not speeches. The headline will focus on legality, personality, and outrage. And there's going to be plenty of that. So the real story, though, guys, is structural. It's foreign policy being run like an asset recovery operation. And whether that holds up legally, politically, or logistically is still an open question. But the intent is no longer ambiguous. It's not chaos. It's choreography. And once you see that, the story stops being shocking and starts being legible. Guys, read into it. Do your own research. This is Ledger Prime.